everybody, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are definitely international tonight. I've seen all sorts of places, including Devon. We'll be talking about that in a short while, I'm sure. Cheers for that, Brian. I just remembered when I turned the mic off that I forgot to ask, can anybody hear me? So cheers for that, Brian. Ever got my back. Good man. Great to see so many people diving into the chat room and saying hi. I am seeing all your messages, so obviously I can't respond to all of them. I'm a man, I can't multitask, but great to see so many of you there. Nathan, I've seen that you've posted. Great to see you there, mate. Nathan Wolf, Mark Wood, car photographer. I don't want any pressure tonight, mate. I know you're there, that's bad enough, so behave. Jay Wolgers, I don't know actually what your name is, but I can see your handle. Listen, thank you so much for asking. Yeah, she's good. I'm just glad that I did go to see her when I did, seeing as we have a second lockdown upon us in a few days. So thank you so much for asking. Hello everybody, I'm just checking that the microphone was on then. Mark Wood, you shouldn't put these seeds of doubt in my head, it's going to come on automatically. Listen folks, thank you so much for joining me this evening. We're truly international yet again, people from all over the place tuning in, and like I said, especially Devon. I can see that in the comments there, some people asking, have I moved yet? I'll explain all very shortly, but it is positive. with a little bit of a moment, but I'll explain all as we go through. Some people are also asking about my mum, because obviously I mentioned that we weren't doing this on the Friday. We brought it forward to, or brought it back to today. So thank you for your flexibility there. My mum's fine. I'm just glad that I did go to see her when I did. I spent the whole day with her, and yeah, we just chatted all day. It was lovely, really lovely. But I'm glad I did, because obviously the lockdown is coming in a few days. But tonight we are going to be going through, don't forget my graphic there, tonight we're going to be going through the Ford Mustang photo shoot, which if you followed me for a while, you'll know isn't really the kind of stuff that I'd ordinarily do. But one thing I've made a point of doing during this whole situation that we're all having to live in since the end of March is kind of push myself to learn new stuff, doing loads of stuff, learning Premiere Pro, After Effects, but also getting out there to kind of photograph things that maybe I wouldn't ordinarily do, you know, because I think if I hadn't done that, or I wasn't doing it now rather, I think I'd have gone a little bit stir crazy. So I think we're quite lucky in this creative world that we can kind of get out there, do stuff that's going to kind of distract us from what we're currently living through at the moment. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I probably wouldn't have done this photo shoot, but my friend Brian has got rather a tasty looking vehicle, which we just had to photograph. So I'm going to take you through how I photographed this. I'm going to show you the photography. We'll talk about the kit, the editing, and I also want to kind of go through time lapse, because again, it's just something else. Do you know what I mean? It's something else that we can do that's just making us maybe do something different. And while we're doing it, we're not thinking about other stuff. So like I said, we are really lucky in this kind of creative world, whether you're photographers, retouchers, graphic designers, whatever. We're really, really lucky. So there you go. Right, I'm going to play you a quick video. If you haven't seen it already, this is a short behind the scenes video of the Mustang photo shoot. Keep an eye on it, because you'll kind of see how we're doing the photography, and then we'll dive into it, show you the kit, show you how easy it is to photograph them and also retouch them. So I'll play this for you now, and then we'll dive into it. All right, now that was so much fun putting that stuff together. The kind of way that me and Brian, who is actually in the chat room now, Brian Duke, so say hi to Brian. The way we kind of did it was we did the photo shoot first, all the bits we had to do, and then we did the video footage, because obviously the priority was to get the actual pictures done. But let's just dive in, let's have a look at the kit. Not that it really matters what camera you're using, in fact it doesn't, but I want to kind of show you some of the kit. So we'll start off first of all, just to show you what I was using. I'm using the new Sony A7R4. I say new, it's new to me. It's been around about a year and a half now, I think. Thoroughly enjoying it. I decided to use the 85mm G Master. Again, personal choice. And then the lighting we're using is the FJ400 by Westcott. It's basically a studio style light that you have a battery pack in the back of it. There's no cables, and it's nice, free and easy to use as you're walking around. It's got high speed sync. It's got a lot of bump to it. Technical word, so it's really, really useful. Also using this stuff. Now, the two first ones there, TetherTools Air Direct. That's a piece of kit that goes on top of the camera. You may have quickly seen that as I was showing you that video. And then there's TetherTools Smart Shooter 4. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. In fact, I'm going to cover that in the next webinar we do. That'll be a very small segment, because I've had some people saying, why do you need to use that when your camera's got Wi-Fi? There are many, many reasons, and I want to explain more about it later on. But the one I want to talk to you about at the moment is that REVORING, all right, the REVORING. So what is the REVORING? Well, first of all, let me just say, disclaimer, this is not sponsored. I am not paid for doing this by a company if I show their products or anything. In fact, the company who made this don't even know I've got it, I think. That sounds bad, doesn't it? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Let's edit that bit out. I was given this to use by a guy called Paul Gensch, who runs a company called Phototech in the UK. And he's going to be one of the distributors of this. But basically, this is what it is. Because what I learned when I just did the couple of car shoots I've done, one of them being my own car, and then I've done Brian's car. And one thing that's really useful is having a polarizing filter, a polarizer, circular polarizer. So what you have here, right, it's almost like a 2-in-1. Those of you who are maybe landscape photographers, you'll kind of appreciate this more. But what we've got built into this little unit is a variable neutral density filter. In fact, it goes from 1 stop up to 10 stops it can knock out. And it's also got a circular polarizer in it. And rather than you having to buy step-up rings for each of the different size lenses you've got, so you buy them to screw on the top and then you put your filters on, you don't do that with this. I'll try and show you, but basically what you do, can you see that? It's kind of like an aperture there. So what you do is you kind of take it, you open it up like that, put that in the front of your lens, then let go, and it grips onto your lens. So it's nice and quick and easy. It's got the ND filter, as you can see if I just do that. There's your ND filter, just by using that dial on top. And then also you got the circular polarizer. Let me just show you what that does. I found it's really useful when you're photographing cars, because in this little video here, in fact, there's me just kind of turning it. You can see it's really, really easy to turn as you use it. But then look at this when you use it on the car. Look at how now that I'm rotating it, keep an eye on the actual bodywork and the windows especially. Look how they change as I turn that circular polarizer. Because obviously we know that a polarizer affects the angle at which light enters the lens. And by doing that, it takes the reflections off the windows, which is what we want when we're photographing the cars. I mean, look how those side windows now, no reflection whatsoever, which is absolutely brilliant for using on, when we're doing these cars. So the process is, and I'll go through the actual process in a moment, but basically you've got that on the front of the camera, the polarizer bit really. I didn't use the neutral density bit. And each time we're taking a picture, I'm moving that polarizer a little bit to make sure that the area that we're photographing and adding light onto doesn't have any kind of weird reflections on it. All right. So hope that helps. I'm now going to dive into Lightroom and I'm going to show you, in fact, I'll show you the images that I took, and then we'll talk about the actual photography side of it and the process. All right, because this is such fun doing this, especially when it's not something that you do all the time, getting out there and trying something different. So let me just dive into Lightroom and I'll show you what I mean. All right, so I'll try and show you this the best way I can. In Lightroom now, then you can see there's a load of images that have been taken for this particular photo shoot. Now, some of these are for the still image, and some of them are actually for a time lapse, which we'll go through in a minute. But getting back to the actual still image, what I first of all do is put the camera in place, obviously on the tripod using the remote cable, so we don't have to move the camera by pressing down that shutter button. And then I'll take a picture with no flash used whatsoever. But I do use that neutral density filter so that I can get loads of detail in the sky. So this is what I call my base image. And then every picture that I take after that, where I'm using a light just to light up certain parts of the car, I then add on top of this and then mask it in. But just give you an idea of some of the pictures, that's obviously the base one. Images here that you can see that I've got this little flag on where I've picked them, they're the ones that I then use later on to bring in to add a little bit into the final image. So for example, this one here, you can see the lights on. And as I move through these, you'll see how it's been moved around to light certain parts of the car. Now, it doesn't matter that the light stand is there or Brian's there, because those will all be masked out, because it's only going to be small parts of the car that I'm going to use from this particular image. So you can see as we go all the way through, Brian's kind of angling it off to get the best angle we can to get as much detail out of the grille. And once we're happy with that, we'll then start to move the light around to light up the wing, across the top of the bonnet, and so on and so on. So just kind of moving it around, taking your time, no rushing as you're going around it, just making sure as you're doing it. And this is really important to be tethered, because then you can see things nice and big to see if you've got everything that you need. As you're kind of going through the shots, one point to mention, can you see how even though this light that we're using, this FJ400 from Westcott, it's got a tiny little reflector on it, it is pretty much a hard light, okay? But can you see how there is no hard light on the car? There's no like kind of like bright spots in it. I mean, yeah, you can tell, you know, from, if I just zoom in actually, you can tell from here it's a hard light, because the way the light's hitting the wing mirror, we're getting that very, very defined shadow. But what I mean is on the actual bodywork, there's no central part of the light that's really, really blowing out and kind of looking too strong. So the reason for that is the way the light's being used, the position of it. If I go over to Photoshop, let's just go to, where are we? This image first of all. Let's just imagine that this is Brian's car. This is where I am. And then we're going to bring the light in. So this is our light source. If I just zoom in, I've done as best as I can to try to illustrate this. This is the FJ400, or any light source that you're using, with the small reflector on it. Now, when we've got a kind of hard light, we always have the main central part of that light is going to be the brightest and the hardest. But even though we're using a hard light, the outside of it is always going to be soft. And you can see this when you shine a light, like shine a torch at a wall. You'll notice as you get close to the wall with that torch, the center is really, really bright and hard, but then there is an area around it that's soft. And it's this soft edge here that I use to light the car. All right, that's what I use to light the car, rather than this bit right in the middle. So for example, let's just reposition this. So rather than me getting it so that when I'm taking the picture, Brian positions the light so that it's going straight onto the car like this and we get this hot spot, generally what I'll get it to do is this. Give or take, I'll kind of get it position it so that the light skips across the car as opposed to straight onto it. So the actual main bright part, the hard part of the light, is skipping way past the car. It's the soft outside edge here that's hitting the car, and it's this part here that I want to photograph. So we'll kind of move that around and reposition it for all different parts of the car, making sure that it's the soft part that actually lights up the area of the car that we want to use. Now, you might have seen from some of the pictures, as I was just kind of going through them very quickly then in Lightroom, in that grid view, that there were some where you saw Brian kind of holding the light and it looked like he was kind of straight onto the car, which, as I've just said, would then produce a very, very hot, shiny spot right there. But what he's actually doing is, it's the light, you can't really tell from those pictures, but he's actually positioned it above the car so that the center point here, the really hard, strong part of the light, is going straight over the car, not even touching it. But it's the outside bit that's skipping across the bonnet or the roof or whatever. So that's basically how I'm kind of doing the lighting for it. Always the soft edge that you can use instead of the middle bit. In fact, this is a way that you can actually get soft light out of a hard light, if you know what I mean. Always using the outer edge, don't use the center. Obviously, you've got not as much power on this bit. This is where the biggest oomph from the light is coming. So you're going to have reduced power here, but it does add a very, very nice soft light. So that's what you kind of do with all these images here, skipping through. You can see just using a little bit of that light onto there, like so. Now, once I've kind of gone through and I've got all those pictures, like I say, I'll then check them all in the tethering, making sure every part of that car is lit. And then when it comes to the retouching, the first thing I'll do is I'll kind of get my base image and I'll do a few tweaks in the develop module in Lightroom, but then I send that into Photoshop. And then one by one, what I will do is send these images that I've marked, that are the ones that have got the bits that I want, one by one, I will send them over into Photoshop. I don't send them all, I send them one at a time. So for example, let's just go back into Photoshop and I'll show you kind of like here's the finished image, and you can see here now, look, there's all these layers going above. And what we've got is, if I just turn them all off, let's just go down to this bit here. So there's my base image where I actually captured the main part of that headlight on just there. And then I've just cleaned up that little box over here on the side, which we couldn't lift to move out of the way, otherwise we would have done. But then what I've done is I've then started to add in the parts of the picture. Now look, if I turn that layer mask off, you can see that there is lots more in that picture, but I only want to have that particular headlight. Then I've got the tyre, that tyre just there. And if I turn the layer mask so you can see the rest of it, can you see how all that car is going to get in the hot? There's that hot spot. We only want the soft edge on that part of the wheel, and that's what I've actually painted in. And you can see this is how the kind of picture is built up just by sending these images over to finally build up to get your final picture. But to show you how I mask them in, let's just go to this one here. There's my base image. Here are some of the layers that I've already added in. But let's just say now then there's this one layer here that I've brought in, because on this one I want to actually use this bit of the light where it's hitting this little bit of the trim on the car. So I send it over from Lightroom into Photoshop and drag it on top of this image. What I've got to then do is line this image up. Even though I used a cable release, there could still be some little movement in there. I need to line this image up with my base image. Okay, it's really important that I line up with that base image, because what I don't want to do is just highlight all of the layers and then get them to line them up, because they'll all be skew with. I need to tell Photoshop to work from, this is where you work from basically. Line everything up with this one layer. So I bring the layers on top, I rename them to sort of say what part of the picture this one is going to be used for. And then what I do is I bring that layer all the way down the layer stack so it's just above the base layer here, the base image. Now you can do that either by clicking on it and dragging it down, or you can hold down the Command key on your Mac or Control key on Windows and use your right and left square bracket keys to move that particular layer up and down the layer stack. So I need to line these two layers up, and I need to make sure that it's this layer that moves, not the base layer. So what I'll do is I'll click on that base layer, come to the very top of the layers panel and turn on this little padlock icon. So now you can see that it's locked. This isn't going to move anywhere. So now I'll say, right, I need to line up the image with the lower trim on it. So I'll hold down my shift key, click on it so they're both highlighted. Then I come to the edit menu, choose auto align layers, and we get this big auto align layers properties come up with loads of different options in it, but you don't need to do anything. Just leave it in auto, leave it in the defaults, and then click OK. And then once it's lined it up, just get that layer and then take it back to the top of the layer stack. We don't want to use all of the image, so then we add a black layer mask to it. So for me to do that on a Mac, I hold down the Option key, it's the Alt key on Windows, and then click on the layer mask icon, and that hides now the whole content of that particular layer. I then get a nice soft brush, we'll zoom in, and then all I will do is just paint in, making sure at the top here, let's take the opacity all the way up to 100, we might as well. And then with a white brush on this black layer mask, I just paint to bring in this part of the car. All right, so something like that. Now I don't want it to be quite so strong. So now that I've painted that bit in, I'll then lower the opacity of that layer down to something like 50%. Let's zoom out. So now you can see it's just really subtle, but we're not getting all the, you know, the rest of the actual layer there. We're just getting it, let's just turn that layer mask off. We're not getting all of that stuff in. We're only getting this little bit just on the actual trim just there. So it's quite a lengthy process, adding these layers in one by one and painting the bits in, but I've got to say it's actually quite therapeutic when you're doing it. You feel really arty as you're brushing and painting it in. So let's have a quick look at the final image again, just up there. Let's bring all these up, turn all these on. There you go, there's the final image. Right, so hopefully that is clear. It is very therapeutic doing it, just going over and over and over again. But you can see actually when you look at all those pictures in the layer set there, how useful that polarizer is. I forgot to say about that actually. If you wanted to do, if you're in the UK, I think only, you can pre-order that from companies like H&Y, which stands for handyfilters.com. WEX, Park Cameras, CVP. So you can do that. And also, actually, let's just put this on the front here. There you go. Where's the front? There you go, magnetic. Right, okay, so hopefully that helps. I'm seeing some of the comments coming through here. Doug Jefford said, this is like shooting real estate. Do you know, I've never done that. I don't know if I will. I don't know if I will. I don't know what kind of video I could do afterwards. But Doug, if that's your thing, I know, and I've got some friends who do that in the States as well. I make a pretty penny doing that, I must admit. Torque ability, good handle. Makes massive sense when someone teaches you how. Brilliant stuff. That's cool. All right, so well, look, we can also have a bit of a Q&A at the end again, but I want to kind of just dive through to show you some more stuff. There's no hard questions there. Cool. Before we go into the time lapse, I want to show you how you can do. How much is the? Oh, Sue Jackson says, how much is the rotor ring? Now I believe, don't quote me on this one, Sue, but I believe they're going to be talking around about 200 quid, I think, something like that, which, you know, that's a lot of money. However, when you compare it to the fact that you've got up to 10 stops of neutral density filters, so you've got like a big stopper and everything else up to that, so that could cost you quite a bit to buy the filters for that. You've also got, oh, excuse me, you've also got the polarizer. You've also then got to think about maybe having to buy step-up rings. You don't have to do that because of the way this thing works. So I probably think if you brought all of that, you could be talking a couple hundred, well, maybe a couple hundred quid more than what that costs. Now, like I said, I'm not even getting any kind of kickback for telling you about this. I've just been asked to use it. And I mean, Brian will vouch for this. Really, really handy when we were doing the photo shoot of the car, because it's just on quickly. You can turn it and take it off. Really, really cool stuff. Why would you not use a softbox to start? SK's put that. One of the reasons is because we're outside. I had to really kind of burn down the sky. The settings I used for that shot there, actually, of the car, I've got them written down in front of me here. F4, because I wanted it to be a nice wide aperture so that anything behind the car was then going to be out of focus. I didn't want to be shooting at something like F11, F16, something like that. So F4, so wide open aperture, 100 ISO, which then meant I had to really ramp up the speed of the shutter to bring the ambient down. Now, if I didn't want to use high-speed sync, I could, of course, gone from F4 to maybe F11, use the aperture to darken it down. I could have then had a slower shutter speed, but I didn't want everything to be in focus behind. So that's why I had to do that. And I didn't use a softbox because I was having to ask quite a lot of the flash by me just using that single reflector, and what would ordinarily be a hard light, I was getting tons of power out of that flash without it going through the diffusion panels. Although I was using the softer edges, I was still getting more than what I would have done had I used a softbox. And also, being really practical, it was windy. The weather was changing. It was windy one minute, raining bad the next minute. That would have been a nightmare having that softbox on the stand when there was not a third person to hold it. So I hope that makes sense. Right, okay, just quickly mention before I move on, Photoshop Summit. That's I've mentioned about this before. I showed you the video last time with the interview with Dave Cross, my friend who set it all up. 9th to 13th, I put a link in the description. There's tons of stuff being put together for this. I was actually being a bit sneaky earlier on, and I was looking at what the other instructors have done in their folders, because we've all got like a shared folder. So we've got all the videos that we've done, all the assets so you can follow along, PDF workbooks, swag bag, and all that kind of stuff. So there's tons of stuff in there. So check that out. The link's in the description. But now I want to go through, plus he said, Brian says, plus it was very windy that day. It sure was. It sure was, and raining and cold. But it was good fun, Brian. It was good fun. Right, now let's talk about the time lapses, because again, this is something else that we can do that, I mean, I didn't normally do them, but I find it's made a great addition to the videos I've been putting together. Plus, it's just good fun doing something different. So I want to show you how I do my time lapses, and you're going to have to kind of equate this to whatever camera brand it is that you're using when you dive into your menus. But let me just show you a little video that shows how well, it's not really a video, it's kind of like to show you the settings in my camera. Now, ordinarily, here's my settings of the camera. You can see that we've got the aspect ratio is set to 3:2. That's what I do when I'm shooting stills. But when I'm then going to shoot a time lapse, I need to make sure that it's going to be in the kind of like the aspect ratio that I can then put into film footage. So I change this here. You'll just see if I just move it forward. Change it into 16:9, so we've got a nice wide screen. And then I'll just move over to where I've saved the actual settings for the interval shooting function. This is obviously in the Sony. Turn that on, and then we've got a few options in here. So the first one says shooting start time. Now this is one where you basically 5 seconds. I've got it so that once I press the shutter button to start the time lapse, the camera's going to wait 5 seconds for everything to settle down, stop wobbling, before it starts to time lapse. So that's basically what that's doing there. Shooting interval kind of speaks for itself. It's going to take a photo every 3 seconds, and then you can choose how many shots do you want to take. And the great thing is, the more as you choose how many shots you want to take, your camera is going to tell you how long it's going to take to do that. Now, when we did the time lapse, when me and Brian did the time lapse, we kind of set it up for being like, I don't know, it was going to be like 20 minutes, something like that. And we're thinking, great, we just sat back, we had some homemade sausage rolls, homemade bread rolls with cheese and really nice ham in it, thinking it was great. And then all of a sudden, round the airfield, you could see this family, husband, wife and child and dog running. So I had to take those out of some of the shots, but it still worked anyway. So you've got to be quite mindful wherever you are, whatever you're doing a time lapse, is it likely that someone's going to dive into it? But right, let me just now dive again into Lightroom to show you then how you put these time lapses together, which is incredibly easy, really, really easy. All right, so in Lightroom, what I've done is I've separated all the images that were photographed for the time lapse, and I've actually put them into a collection over on the left hand side called Mustang Timeless. This kind of helps me to keep them organized and keep them away from the actual still images that I photographed that are nothing to do with the time lapse. So the first thing I'm going to do then for this time lapse is let's just press on the very first image, press D to come to the develop module, and I'll just make some adjustments in here. So let's go to the basic. I'll bring up some detail on the shadows, and let's just bring up the exposure just a little bit, bring down the highlights, and we'll just boost a little bit of clarity in there as well. Might just get an adjustment brush, and while we're using the adjustment brush, I'll make sure it says auto mask in the bottom right, and we'll turn on the show selected mask overlay. And let's just paint over the brush with this adjustment brush just here. It doesn't have to be, you know, perfect. It's just to give the car a little bit of a kick, so we can increase the exposure on it just a little bit. Something like that'll do. That'll be fine. Maybe a little bit there. I've gone over the edges just a little bit, so we'll go to the erase. And I'll just come in and take it off there, like so, and a bit off that bumper over there. All right, let's turn off the show selected mask overlay. You can see now with the adjustment brush, I've got the control now of kind of just bringing a little bit more focusing on the car. So something like that. So now we'll come down to the detail tab, add a little bit of sharpening in. So I'll hold down the option key, click, and drag on that masking slider so that we can just kind of control where we want that sharpening to be. If I don't do that, then the whole of the image is white, as you can see. That means everything's been sharpened. But once I'm holding down the option key and then dragging that masking slider, I can control where the sharpening is. And that's where the white areas are. The black areas are having no sharpening at all. So something like that's looking good. And then I'll just press R on the keyboard. Let's give this a nice crop, because this is going to be in a video, 1920 by 1080. So we'll come up to the cropping ratios here. I've got one here, 16 by 9, and I'll just position it something like that'll be fine. So now that I've adjusted that one, let's go back to the grid view. That's the very first image. So what I can now do is, whilst that first image is highlighted, you can see just there, if I now scroll down all the way to the very last image, hold down my shift key and then click down, all of them are highlighted, and then I can come to the bottom right here where it says sync settings. And when I click on that, the synchronize settings properties comes up, where all of the available adjustments that I could make are now here displayed, and they've all got ticks in. So it's basically saying, do you want me to synchronize every other image with all the adjustments that you've just done? I mean, I could come in and just turn some of these off, but it's no point. I'll leave them all ticked. I'll say yes, do every adjustment I've just done to all the other images in this collection here. So I'll click on synchronize. You see the progress bar on the top left hand side zips across, and then eventually you'll start to see all the images kind of pop in as their adjustments are made. You can start to see a little bit of movement going on within there probably just now. Now, okay, so once that's done, let's have a quick look at some of these images, make sure they're all there. So see, now these have all been, you'll see it pop in a moment. There you go. Go to the next one and it'll pop as it's been, that adjustments have been applied. Now, once that's all done, the next thing to do is to get all these images out of Lightroom into a folder on your computer. So I'm going to hold down the Command key on Mac, Control key on Windows, and press in A. So they're now all highlighted. And then I'll go to the File menu, choose Export, and here I can choose where I want them to be exported to and what dimensions. I'm just going to get them saved into a folder on my desktop I've called Timelapse. The naming of them, I've got options here I can choose from here, but the best way to do this is to have a name of the file and then a sequence number. That makes things a lot easier in Photoshop. And this original number will go for custom name and sequence. So Mustang and then 1, and then it'll name them all the way through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through to the final 1. That's what we want there. Anything else down here? The longest edge, 1920 pixels, because we want this to be 1920 by 1080. And I think that's looking good. So the next thing I do is just click on export, sit back and let Lightroom export all of those images into that folder on my desktop. And obviously, depending on how many images you chose to shoot for your time lapse will depend on how long this particular thing takes. Now I'm exporting 271. So I'm not going to let you sit there while that goes through. I will jump forward. Let's speed it up to jump forward to the next part. All right, so now all those images are exported. Let's dive over to Photoshop. And all we need to do here is go to the Open. And then we navigate to the folder on the computer where we saved all those images out. Here we can see they are. Let's have a look here. It's actually named them in reverse here. So there's the last image. Scroll all the way down. There's the first image. So what I'm going to do, I don't know why I called it number 2 to start off with, but you know what I mean. This is the very first image. So I will click on the very first one. Then it gives me the option here of clicking image sequence. So when I put a tick in here, it's going to bring all the images into Photoshop, with this one being the first and all the others following on behind. So we'll now click on Open. And we'll choose here the frame rate that we want. Now I tend to work in 24 frames per second. So we're going to keep it at 24. You can change it there. So we click on Open. It'll then bring it in, and it just looks like it's brought a single image into Photoshop. But if you look over in the Layers panel, you can see you've got a little film strip icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the thumbnail. So now if we go to the Window menu and choose Timeline, at the bottom you can see now. So you can see now we've got this slider for dragging through the film strip, and you can see there is our time lapse. So we can just have that, press space, and it'll run through the time lapse like so. So you can see there is our finished time lapse. To get it out of Photoshop, all we need to do is go to the File menu, choose Export, and then Render Video. And in here we can name the file, choose where we want it to be saved, and then all the different formats here. H.264 is what I tend to use. Document size, you can see 1920 by 1080. The preset high quality. Frame rate 24 frames per second. All looking good. And then we just click on Render. Once you click on Render, it then exports it from Photoshop as a video file. Now looking at that, then I just saw in the comments that was it Avril and NASA said that there was image 1. I didn't see it. I just kind of went for it, but it seemed to work. It seemed to work really, really well. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. Listen, I want to talk to you. I'm going to set a challenge actually for time lapses, because they are really great fun to do. I mean, they're great for adding in those things where the clouds are moving, certainly behind all like the dramatic car and what have you. But there's also little things you could do with, I don't know, bird tables, birds feeding, set that up and just see them all coming in, flowers moving. I don't know, anything. Really, really good fun. I did one before, and it was on when I first photographed my car. Let me just play that behind the scenes video so you can see that, and then we'll talk about the challenge. They are so much fun. They really, really are. And I think they add a great little thing into your videos. So, time-lapse challenge. It's not really a challenge. It's just something to do, because I've kind of said that, you know, we've got a lot of stuff going on at the moment, haven't we? We're living in very, very strange times. And like I said already, being able to be creative and just have that little thing where you can go off and do your thing so that your mind is elsewhere rather than on the current situation. It's like escapism. So I thought, why don't we say, let's all have a time-lapse challenge or competition, or say like between now and the next webinar, which I'm kind of saying is going to be in a week. I'll explain about that in a minute. In a week's time, go out there and do a time-lapse, but it's got to be no more than 10 seconds. It can be on anything. And if you do one, you'll love it anyway if you've never done them before, because it's great escapism. But send me them. Send me the time-lapse that you do, and then the next webinar, we'll make sure we get a little segment where we can share them. And if there's anything else about what you do, any websites or any newsletters or something like that you want me to share, then we can share those on here as well, because this is what I'm loving about doing this stuff for the, you folks as part of the community, the email group, just sharing stuff. I mean, it's great seeing, all the communication going on in the chat room. So do a time lapse, send it over, and we'll kind of see what we can do and get them up on the video as well. All right, so what was I going to say to you? That's pretty much all I wanted to go through. I'll check to see if there are any questions. Was that Per has said, I like the number plate on your car. I've had some stick about that by some friends, but I like it, and thank you very much, Per. So we are in interesting times. I kind of mentioned about the fact, well, you all kind of know really, because you're part of the group, about the house move and all that kind of stuff. Well, the update is this. We exchanged last week the completion date, or as I think in America you call it your what do you call it in America? It's not completion. I forget what you call it, but you call it something else in America, don't you? Don't complete. But that's set for Thursday. Now, yesterday we had the announcement about a second lockdown coming in on Thursday. So to say that's caused a little bit of stress is an understatement. So if I'm honest, I did have, because I can be honest amongst friends, I did have a little bit of a meltdown last night. A little bit of a meltdown. I think we're allowed that every now and again. But this morning, wake up, brush yourself off, crack on. And that's why one of the reasons I was so looking forward to just getting with you folks tonight to do this, because it's escapism for me to be able to do this. It's all going to work out fine, and I know that there are some people who are living in Devon at the moment who are in the chat room, so I'm very soon to be your neighbour, but I'll keep you posted. All being well, we'll be able to just get on with it this week, and that's it. That's 14 years of planning, prep, finally coming to fruition. We can see that light at the end of the tunnel getting brighter. But folks, that's closure. Jay Woolgers, closure. That's the word I was looking for. Not complete, closure in America. Les Campbell's put HMY REVORING is see it on the WeX UK website. Yeah, they're taking pre-orders, I believe. Les, just let us know in the chat how much that is, just out of interest. Closing, yeah, John Slem, Ralph, closing. Thank you very much, folks. Yeah, that's it really. That's it. If anybody does have any other questions, by all means post them or email me. I'll make sure I get to answer them. But thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I've really needed this. I don't know about you, but I've really needed this. I'm loving doing this with you folks. So I'm going to love you and leave you. And I will see you. We're going to say in a week's time. Might be Friday, might be Sunday. It all depends what happens this week. But I will see you very soon. So keep an eye on your inbox. And in the meantime, with all that's going on, take care, look after yourselves, do what you got to do, and fingers crossed we'll be on the other side very, very soon. But take care, folks, and thanks for joining. Right, I'm still here. I am going though now. Thanks so much, folks. I am now off to read your comments and go and grab a beer.